He looked at the bill, sneered at the single mother serving him, and wrote 3 words on the receipt that would haunt her for months. Get a real job. Preston Sterling, a real estate mogul worth $300 million, thought he was just teaching a lazy waitress a lesson about ambition. He walked out of that diner feeling powerful. But he didn't know that the woman he just humiliated held the only key to saving his legacy. He didn't know that in less than 48 hours. Their lives would collide in a way that money couldn't fix. This is the story of the tip that was refused, and the lesson that cost a fortune. The rain in Seattle wasn't just rain that Tuesday night. It was a relentless, freezing sheet of water that battered the windows of the Oakwood Grill. It was a mid-range steakhouse on the edge of the financial district, the kind of place where business deals were closed over scotch and ribeyes, but where the staff struggled to pay rent in the very city they served. At 8:45 p.m., the bell above the heavy oak door chimed. The hostess, a teenager named Jenny, stiffened. She recognized the man shaking off a soaked black trench coat immediately. Everyone did. It was Preston Sterling. Preston wasn't just a regular, he was a force of nature, and not a benevolent one. At 52, he was the CEO of Sterling Horizons, a development firm responsible for gentrifying half the Pacific Northwest. He had eyes like polished flint and a reputation for shredding contracts and people with equal enthusiasm. He didn't walk into a room, he occupied it. "Booth 4, Preston barked, not looking at Jenny. "And tell whoever is serving to keep the water glass full. I have a headache, and I have 0 patience for incompetence tonight." In the kitchen, Sam Bennett leaned her forehead against the cool stainless steel of the prep counter. She closed her eyes for a second, just trying to breathe. She was 28, but felt 40. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a fraying ponytail, and her apron was stained with coffee from a collision with a busboy earlier. "Sam," the manager. Rick hissed, sliding a ticket onto the rail. "Table 4. It's Sterling." Sam's stomach dropped. "Rick, please. Not tonight. I've got to get out by 10. Mrs. Gable charges extra if I'm late picking up Mia. You want the shift or not? Bennett." Rick didn't look up from his clipboard. He specifically asked for the quiet section. "That's you. Just smile, pour the wine, and maybe he won't try to buy the building just to fire you." Sam wiped her hands on her apron, took a deep breath, and walked out onto the floor. She needed this. She needed every single dime. Mia's medication had gone up again, and the insurance company was fighting her on the last round of chemotherapy claims. When Sam approached booth 4, Preston was already on his phone, his voice a low, angry rumble. "I don't care if the tenants have lived there for 30 years. Michael, evict them. Offer them a pittance for relocation and lock the doors. We bulldoze on Monday." He slammed the phone down onto the table, the screen cracking slightly against the salt shaker. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," Sam said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her tired blue eyes. "Can I start you with scotch, neat, and the fillet? Rare. If it's medium rare, I send it back. If the vegetables are soggy, I send it back. Do we understand the parameters of this transaction?" He didn't look at her. He was scrolling through emails on a tablet. "Yes, water, sir. Rare. Right away." The next hour was a masterclass in humiliation. Preston snapped his fingers when he wanted water. He complained the bread was peasant food. When Sam accidentally let the water pitcher drip a single drop of condensation onto the corner of the table, not even on him. Just the table, he looked at her like she had spit in his face. Do they train you people? Preston sneered, wiping the droplet with a napkin as if it were toxic waste. Or do you just wander in off the street looking for handouts? Sam bit her tongue so hard she tasted iron. For Mia, she chanted internally. Just for Mia. I apologize, sir. I'll get fresh napkins. At 9:50 p.m., Preston signaled for the check. The bill came to $145.50. Sam stood by the register, watching him from the corner of her eye. She saw him pull out a sleek, black titanium credit card. He signed the merchant copy with a flourish. Her heart hammered. A standard tip on that bill would be nearly $30. $30 was 3 days of groceries. It was the copay for Mia's next blood test. She held her breath as he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked past her without a glance. She rushed to the table to collect the receipt. She picked it up. Her hands were trembling. On the line for the tip, there was a harsh, dark slash through the zero, and written underneath, in aggressive, jagged cursive, were the words, "Service was pathetic. Stop begging and get a real job. Total $145.50. Sam stared at the paper. The noise of the restaurant faded into a high-pitched ring. The cruelty wasn't casual, it was calculated. He had taken the time to write it. He wanted her to hurt. Tears, hot and humiliating, pricked her eyes. She looked toward the door, but Preston Sterling was already gone, disappearing into the back seat of a waiting black Mercedes, leaving nothing behind but the scent of expensive cologne and the ashes of Sam's hope for the night. But as Sam cleared the table, wiping away the crumbs of a meal that cost more than her car payment, she saw something wedged between the leather cushion of the booth and the wall. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, old, worn, and cracked with age. Sam hesitated. The protocol was to turn it into the manager, but Rick was currently screaming at the dishwasher in the back. And frankly, after the note Preston had left, Sam felt a surge of petty rebellion. Why should I help him, she thought. He told me to get a real job. Maybe a real professional wouldn't clean up his lost property. She shoved the notebook into her apron pocket, just as Rick stormed out. Bennett, you clocked out yet? You're burning labor hours. Going now, Rick. The drive to Mrs. Gable's house was a white-knuckled nightmare. Sam's 2008 Honda Civic had a heater that only worked when it wanted to, and tonight, it chose to be dead. The windshield wipers screeched against the glass, fighting the torrential Seattle downpour. Every time she stopped at a red light, she looked at the crumpled receipt on the passenger seat. Get a real job. I have 3 jobs, she whispered to the empty car, her voice cracking. I scrub floors at the gym at 4 a.m. I serve entitled jerks at the grill until 10 p.m. And I'm a nurse to a dying 6-year-old in between. She arrived at Mrs. Gable's duplex at 10:15 hum. Mrs. Gable, an elderly widow with a heart of gold but a strict schedule, was waiting at the door with Mia asleep in her arms. She's been coughing, Sam, Mrs. Gable whispered, transferring the sleeping child into Sam's arms. Mia felt light. Too light. She was a bundle of pink fleece and fragile bones. She asked for you around 8. I know. I tried to get out, Sam said, tucking a $10 bill, half of her tips from the other tables, into Mrs. Gable's hand. Thank you, Margaret. Keep your money, honey. Mrs. Gable tried to push it back. No, you bought her that soup. Take it, Sam insisted. She couldn't accept charity. It was the one shred of dignity she had left. back at their tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the south side. Sam laid Mia down on the mattress they shared. The apartment was clean but sparse. There was no TV, only books. The walls were decorated with Mia's drawings of butterflies and rainbows, colourful attempts to cover up the water stains on the wallpaper. Mia stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes, once bright and vibrant, were dull, rimmed with dark circles. "Mummy, I'm here, baby," Sam cooed, brushing a strand of thin hair from Mia's forehead. She felt hot, too hot. "Did you make $1 million today?" Mia asked, her voice raspy. It was their little game. Sam choked back a sob. She thought of Preston Sterling's receipt. "Not today. Bug. But I met a dragon." "Did you slay him?" "Not yet," Sam whispered, kissing her forehead. "Go back to sleep." Once Mia's breathing evened out, Sam went to the kitchen table and sat down. She pulled out her pile of bills. Seattle Children's Hospital. Past due. Electric final notice. Rent due in 3 days. She opened her wallet. $42. That was it. That was everything until payday on Friday. In frustration, she slammed her hand on the table, and the small leather notebook she'd taken from the booth fell out of her pocket. She stared at it. It looked ancient. The leather was rubbed smooth by years of handling. There was no name on the cover. No corporate logo for Sterling Horizons. Just a simple, brown book. Curiosity warred with exhaustion. She knew it was an invasion of privacy. She knew she should just drop it at the restaurant tomorrow. But this man had dehumanized her. He had looked at her struggle and laughed. She wanted to know what kind of man had a heart that black. She opened the cover. She expected business contacts, maybe codes for bank accounts or illegal offshore ledgers she could turn into the FBI. Instead, the first page was dated October 14th, 1998. The handwriting wasn't the jagged, aggressive scrawl from the receipt. It was neater, younger. She said yes. "I can't believe it." Elizabeth said yes. "I'm going to be a father. I promise. I won't be like my dad. I'm going to build a world for this kid." Sam frowned. She turned the page. June 2003. "Arthur turns 5 today. He wants a bike. I told him he has to earn it, but I already bought it. It's hiding in the garage. I just want to see his face." Sam flipped forward, years passing in the flip of a page. She saw the tone change. The entries became shorter, more rushed. August 2012. The deal with Omnicorp closed. $50 million. I missed Arthur's baseball championship. Elizabeth is furious. She doesn't understand I'm doing this for them. December 2015. Elizabeth left, taking Arthur. She says I'm married to the buildings. Not her. Let her go. I don't need distractions. And then, the pages stopped for a long time, blank white sheets representing years of silence. Sam felt a chill. This wasn't a business ledger. It was a confession of a man slowly losing his soul to his own ambition. She flipped to the very last entry. It was dated just yesterday. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. The doctor called. It's stage 4, pancreatic. They gave me 6 months, maybe less. I have $300 million, and I can't buy a single day. I called Arthur. He hung up. I am going to die alone in a penthouse that feels like a tomb. What was it all for? Sam stopped breathing. Preston Sterling, the man who treated her like dirt, the man who sneered at her poverty, was dying, and he was terrified. A loose photograph fluttered out from the back of the book. Sam caught it before it hit the floor. It was an old Polaroid, a young Preston Sterling, laughing, covered in mud, holding a little boy on his shoulders. On the back, written in faded ink, "My World, 2004. Sam looked from the photo to the stack of bills on her table. She held the private thoughts of one of the richest men in the city in her hands. A man who was about to bulldoze a neighborhood. A man who had humiliated her. She knew, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that this book was worth money. Tabloids would pay thousands for the secret diary of the dying tycoon. Competitors would kill to know he was sick so they could tank his stock price. She could sell it. She could pay for Mia's treatment. She could save her daughter by destroying the man who told her to get a real job. It would be justice, wouldn't it? Sam looked at Mia, sleeping fitfully on the mattress. She looked at the receipt, still sitting on the table. Service was pathetic. "You want a lesson, Mr. Sterling?" Sam whispered to the empty room, her eyes hardening. "I'm going to give you one." But it wasn't the lesson he would expect. The next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving Seattle scrubbed clean and grey. Sam called in sick to her cleaning job, a loss of $60 she couldn't afford, but she had a mission. She dressed in her best outfit, a charcoal blazer she'd bought at Goodwill and black slacks. She pinned her hair up tight. She looked in the mirror. She didn't look like a waitress. She looked like a woman who had survived hell and was ready for round 2. She took the bus downtown, the leather notebook burning a hole in her bag. The Sterling Horizons headquarters was a monolith of glass and steel piercing the sky. The lobby was silent, smelling of expensive lilies and intimidation. Sam walked up to the reception desk. The woman behind it looked like a model, typing on a keyboard that made no sound. "Can I help you?" The receptionist didn't look up. "I'm here to see Preston Sterling," Sam said, her voice steady. The receptionist finally looked up, her eyes scanning Sam's outfit, spotting the fray on the blazer's cuff. A smirk touched her lips. "Mr. Sterling doesn't take walk-ins. Do you have an appointment?" "No. But I have something of his. Something he lost. Deliveries go to the loading dock on 4th Street. It's not a delivery." Sam leaned in, placing her hands on the marble desk. "Tell him the waitress from the Oakwood Grill is here. Tell him I have his world." The receptionist blinked, confused by the code. But something in Sam's intensity made her hesitate. She picked up the phone. "Security. I have a woman here who claims... Wait. Yes. A waitress. She says..." The receptionist listened, her face paling. "Yes, sir. Right away." She hung up and looked at Sam with wide eyes. "Top floor. The elevator is unlocked for you." The ride up took a full minute. When the doors opened, Sam stepped into an office that was larger than her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city Preston owned. Preston Sterling was standing by the window, his back to her. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket today. His shoulders looked thinner than they had the night before. "You have some nerve," Preston said, turning around. His face was grey, his eyes bloodshot. "I realized I lost it this morning. I figured a busboy stole it to sell on eBay. I'm not a thief, Mr. Sterling," Sam said, walking across the plush carpet. She stopped 10 feet from him. "Then what are you? An opportunist? You read it, didn't you?" His voice was dangerous. "I did." Preston laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Of course. So, what's the price you know about the cancer? You know the stock will tank if the board finds out. How much to keep your mouth shut? 10,020. He walked to his desk and pulled out a checkbook. He didn't even look at her, just like at the restaurant. He was treating this like a transaction. 50,000, Preston said, writing. That's a lot of tips. Isn't it enough to get you out of that apron? He ripped the check out and held it toward her. Sam looked at the check. $50,000. It would pay off all the medical bills. It would pay rent for 2 years. It would buy Mia new clothes, healthy food, toys. It was salvation. All she had to do was take it. Sam reached into her bag. Preston smirked, expecting her to grab the check. Instead, she pulled out the notebook. She walked forward and placed the notebook gently on his desk, right on top of the polished mahogany. Then, she took the check from his hand. Preston watched her, his eyes narrowing. Smart girl. Sam looked at the check. She looked at the number. $50,000. Then, slowly, deliberately, she tore the check in half, then in quarters. Preston's jaw dropped. The smirk vanished. What the hell are you doing? I don't want your money, Mr. Sterling, Sam said, dropping the confetti of paper onto his desk. And I don't want your pity. Then what do you want? Preston shouted, genuinely confused. You're a waitress. I saw your shoes. I saw your car. You're broke. Why would you tear up a fortune? Because, Sam said, her voice shaking slightly, but gaining strength. Last night you told me to get a real job. You told me I had no ambition. You judged my entire life based on a 30-second interaction where you couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. She pointed to the notebook. I read that book. You're dying, Preston, and you're scared. You've spent your whole life building this tower. She gestured to the room. And you realized that it's cold at the top. You lost your wife. You lost your son. And now you think you can buy your way out of loneliness the same way you tried to buy my silence. Preston looked like he had been slapped. He gripped the edge of his desk. Get out. I'm going, Sam said, but I wanted to return that to you. Not for a reward, but because that photo in the back, the one of you and your son. She paused, her eyes welling up. My daughter is 6. Her name is Mia. She has leukemia. I work 3 jobs to keep her alive. I serve rude men who treat me like garbage because her smile is worth more than my dignity. Preston froze. I brought that book back because I know what it's like to be terrified of losing the person you love most in the world. Sam said softly, You have all the money on earth, and you can't call your son. I have $3 in my bank account, but I get to go home and hold my daughter tonight. You're right, Mr. Sterling. I don't have a real job like yours. I have a life. She turned around. I hope you find peace. Mr. Sterling, the check is in the trash, just like your opinion of me. Sam walked to the elevator. She didn't look back. She pressed the button, her heart pounding in her throat. She had just thrown away $50,000. She was insane. She was going to go home to a final notice and a sick child. But as the doors closed, she saw Preston Sterling standing frozen in the middle of his office, his hand resting on the battered leather notebook, staring at her as if he had just seen a ghost. The bus ride home from downtown felt like a funeral procession. The adrenaline of the confrontation with Preston Sterling had faded, replaced by a cold, gnawing nausea in the pit of Sam's stomach. I tore up $50,000. The thought replayed in her mind on an agonizing loop. She sat near the back of the bus, clutching her purse, staring at her worn-out sneakers. Why had she done it? Pride to teach a lesson to a man who would probably forget her name by dinner. You did it because you're a mother, she told herself. You did it because you can't buy dignity. But dignity didn't pay the rent. When Sam turned the corner to her apartment complex, her heart stopped. There was a bright orange sticker plastered to her front door. It was the color of emergency, of disaster. Even from the sidewalk, she knew what it was. Notice to vacate. She ran up the steps, her breath hitching. She ripped the paper down, pursuant to failure to pay rent for the months of October and November. Eviction proceedings will commence in 72 hours. 72 hours. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so violently she dropped them twice. Inside, the apartment was dark. Mrs. Gable had already picked up Mia for her afternoon nap. Sam slid down the door until she hit the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest. The apartment was silent, save for the dripping of the leaky faucet in the kitchen, a rhythmic reminder of everything that was broken. Her phone buzzed. It was the hospital billing department. She ignored it. It buzzed again. A text from the pharmacy prescription number 49201 is ready for pickup. Copay, $85. She didn't have $85. She had $3. Sam squeezed her eyes shut, hot tears leaking out. The image of the torn check on Preston's mahogany desk burned behind her eyelids. She could have walked into that pharmacy and bought the medicine. She could have paid the landlord. She could have bought Mia a winter coat that actually fit. "I'm sorry, Mia," she whispered into the empty room. "Mummy's so sorry." She wasn't a hero. She was a fool. She had chosen moral superiority over survival, and now her daughter was going to pay the price. Later that afternoon, she went to pick up Mia. "Mrs. Gable looked worried. "She's been asking for you. Sam, she's lethargic today. She didn't want to eat her soup." Mia was sitting on Mrs. Gable's floral sofa, wrapped in a blanket. Her skin was translucent, the blue veins visible beneath the surface. When she saw Sam, she offered a weak smile. "Did you slay the dragon, Mummy?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sam picked her up, burying her face in Mia's neck to hide her tears. She smelled like baby shampoo and sickness. "I think the dragon won this time." "Baby," Sam choked out. "Dragons never win," Mia murmured, resting her head on Sam's shoulder. "Nights just get tired sometimes." That night, Mia's fever spiked to 103. Sam spent the night sponging her forehead with cool water, counting the seconds, terrified to call an ambulance she couldn't afford, yet terrified not to. By 3 a.m., Sam made a decision. She would go back to the Oakwood Grill tomorrow. She would beg Rick for double shifts. She would sell her car. She would sell her blood plasma. She would do anything, but deep down, she knew it wouldn't be enough. The clock had run out, 5 miles away. In a penthouse that touched the clouds, Preston Sterling was awake. He sat in his Eames lounge chair, a glass of untouched scotch on the side table. The apartment was a masterpiece of modern design, sleek, minimal, expensive, and completely, utterly dead. On the coffee table in front of him lay 2 things: the battered leather notebook and the confetti of the torn check Sam had left behind. Preston picked up a piece of the check. He had written checks for millions of dollars without blinking. He had bought companies, destroyed competitors, and bribed politicians. Money was his language. It was how he controlled the world. But this waitress, this nobody, She had refused to speak his language. "I have $3 in my bank account, but I get to go home and hold my daughter tonight." Her words echoed in the silence, louder than the city traffic below. Preston looked at the notebook. He opened it to the picture of Arthur, his son. He hadn't spoken to Arthur in 7 years. The last time they spoke, Arthur had called him a monster wrapped in money. Preston had responded by cutting him out of the will. Now, Preston was dying, and the only person who had looked him in the eye and told him the truth was a woman he had insulted. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "It's 4 a.m. Mr. Sterling," a groggy voice answered. It was Michael, his head of security and private investigator. "I don't care," Preston barked, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "I need you to find someone. Her name is Sam. Wait." He realized he didn't even know her last name. "She works at the Oakwood Grill. First name Sam, blonde, tired. I want a full dossier. Everything. Finances, family, medical records. I want it on my desk by 8 a.m. Is she a threat? Sir, did she steal something?" Preston looked at the notebook. "No. She gave me something back. Just do it." 4 hours later, the sun was rising over the Puget Sound, casting a golden light into Preston's office. Michael stood nervously in front of the desk, sliding a thick manila folder across the mahogany. "It's bleak, sir," Michael said, clearing his throat. Preston opened the folder. Name Sam Jean Bennett, age 28, marital status. Widowed. Husband died in a construction accident 3 years ago. No life insurance. Employment, the Oakwood Grill waitress. Fit Life gym janitor. Uber Eats driver. Dependents, Mia Bennett. Age 6. Medical status dependent. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Relapsed. Preston froze. He scanned the financial documents Michael had pulled. Bank balance $3.42. Debt $142,000. Medical. Housing eviction. Notice filed yesterday. Preston felt a physical blow to his chest. He looked at the photo of Mia clipped to the file. She was a bald, smiling little girl holding a stuffed bear. He thought about the night at the restaurant. He had snapped his fingers at Sam. He had complained about a drop of water. He had written, "Get a real job" on a receipt for a woman who was working 3 of them just to keep that little girl alive. He looked at the tip line on the copy of the receipt included in the file. He had saved $30. $30. To him, it was nothing. To Sam Bennett. That $30 was antibiotics. It was a meal. It was a lifeline. Preston stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. A wave of shame, hot and unfamiliar, washed over him. He had spent his life thinking poverty was a lack of ambition. He realized now, staring at the file of a woman fighting a war he couldn't imagine, that he knew nothing about strength. "Get the car," Preston said, his voice hoarse. "Where are we going?" "Sir, the office." "The site?" "No." Preston grabbed the leather notebook and shoved it into his pocket. "We're going to the hospital." And Michael, "Sir, call the bank. I need a transfer. A big one." Sam was in the waiting room of Seattle Children's Hospital. They had been there for 6 hours. Mia had collapsed just after breakfast. The doctors were with her now. Sam was sitting in a plastic chair, staring at the scuffed linoleum. She had run out of tears. She was just hollow. She had called Rick to tell him she couldn't make her shift. He had fired her over the phone. "Business is business. Bennett," he'd said. So this was it. No job, no home, and her daughter was fading. "Ms. Bennett?" Sam looked up. A nurse was standing there, looking sympathetic. "Doctor, Evans needs to speak with you. It's about the billing." Sam stood up, her legs trembling. "I told you, I can apply for the charity grant again. Please don't stop treating her. I'll sign whatever you want." "It's not that," the nurse said gently. "Please just come this way." Sam followed her down the hallway, her heart pounding. They stopped outside a private conference room. The nurse opened the door. Sitting at the table wasn't a billing administrator. It was Preston Sterling. He looked different. The arrogance was gone. He was wearing a simple sweater and slacks, and he looked tired, old. Sam stopped in the doorway, her hands clenching into fists. "You... Sam!" Preston stood up. He didn't move toward her. He stayed on his side of the room, respectful of the space. "What are you doing here?" Sam's voice rose, cracking with exhaustion and rage. "Did you come to see the pathetic Waitress fail? Did you come to see what happens when I don't get a real job?" "No," Preston said softly. "I came to apologize." "I don't want your apology," Sam yelled, the sound echoing in the small room. "My daughter is in there fighting for her life, and I just lost my job because I'm here. I don't have time for your guilty conscience." "I know," Preston said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the notebook. "You told me yesterday that I was poor because I had no one. You were right." He took a breath. "I spoke to the hospital administration. Sam went cold. "If you had them stop her treatment—" "I paid it," Preston said. The room went silent. Sam blinked. "What?" "I paid it, all of it," Preston said, his voice steady. "The past due balance, the current stay, and I established a trust in Mia's name to cover every treatment she will ever need until she's 21. Bone marrow transplants, chemo, recovery. It's done. Paid in full." Sam grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. The world was spinning. "Why, because you felt bad about the tip?" "No." Preston shook his head. "Because of what you said about your daughter, that her smile is worth more than your dignity." He walked around the table, stopping a few feet from her. He looked vulnerable, terrified. Even, "I have a son. Sam, Arthur. I haven't seen him in 7 years. I'm dying. I have maybe 4 months left. If I go to him now, if I try to give him money, he'll spit in my face, just like you did." Preston looked down at his hands. "I can buy buildings. I can buy silence. I can even buy your daughter's health. But I can't buy my son back. I don't know how to talk to him. I don't know how to be a father without a checkbook." He looked up at Sam, his eyes pleading. "I didn't just come here to pay the bill. Sam, I need a favor, a trade." Sam stared at him. The anger was draining away, replaced by shock. "What trade? I want to hire you," Preston said. "Not as a waitress, not as a cleaner." "Then as what?" "As my consultant," Preston said. "I need you to teach me how to apologize. I need you to help me write a letter to Arthur, not a business letter, a real one. I need you to show me how to be the kind of parent who would work 3 jobs and tear up a fortune for their child." He held out his hand. It was shaking slightly. "Help me fix this before I die, Sam. And in exchange, you'll never have to worry about a bill again. I'll give you the real job I taunted you about, but this time you'll be the boss. You'll run my charitable foundation. You'll help families like yours." Sam looked at his hand. She looked at the man who had humiliated her, now begging for help. She thought of Mia, safe, treated, covered. She thought of the eviction notice. She realized that the lesson she gave him hadn't just hurt him. It had woken him up. Sam took a step forward. She didn't take his hand yet. "First," she said, her voice firm, "you're going to need to learn how to make a decent cup of coffee, because we're going to be here all night working on that letter." Preston Sterling, the billionaire tycoon, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. A small, genuine smile cracked his face. "I think I can manage that." Sam took his hand. "Deal." The transformation of Preston Sterling didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful excavation of a man who had buried his heart under layers of concrete and ego for 50 years. For the next 6 weeks, Sam didn't just become his assistant. She became his anchor. She finished her final shifts at the Oakwood Grill, walking through the dining room with a new lightness, no longer weighed down by the crushing inevitability of poverty. But her real work began when she clocked out. She would take the bus to the penthouse, and later, as Preston's condition deteriorated, to the private wing of Seattle Grace Hospital. The task was simple in theory, but agonizing in practice. Write one letter. Just one. "Read it back to me," Sam said, one rainy Tuesday evening. The hospital room was dimly lit, the only sound the rhythmic beep of the morphine pump and the scratching of Mia's crayons on paper in the corner. Mia was there because Sam couldn't afford a sitter, but Preston insisted she come. He said the sound of a child playing was the only thing that drowned out the silence of the room. Preston, looking skeletal in a pale blue hospital gown, adjusted his reading glasses with trembling hands. The titan of industry who had once made grown men cry in boardrooms was now terrified of a blank sheet of paper. "Dear Arthur," Preston read, his voice raspy. "I am writing to inform you of the transfer of assets regarding the Sterling estate. The portfolio is robust, and I have ensured that the tax liabilities are minimized for your convenience." "Stop." Sam didn't shout, but her voice cut through the air like a knife. She walked over to the bed and gently pulled the paper from his hands. "Preston, look at me." He looked up, his eyes watery and defeated. "I don't know what else to say. Sam, I provided for him. I gave him the best schools, the fastest cars, the deepest connections. That was my language. That was how I loved him. And that is why he hasn't spoken to you in 7 years, Sam said, sitting on the edge of the bed. She picked up the battered leather notebook from the nightstand. "You're writing a business contract. Preston, you need to write a confession." She flipped the book open to the dog-eared page from June 2003. "Tell him about the bike." Preston flinched as if she had struck him. The bike that was a lifetime ago. "It's the only time in this entire book you wrote about him like a father, not a financier," Sam insisted. "You wrote that you bought him a blue Schwinn and hid it in the garage because you just wanted to see his face light up. You didn't write about how much it cost. You wrote about his smile." Preston took his glasses off, rubbing his eyes. A tear tracked through the deep lines of his face. "I never gave it to him." "Sam, not really." "What do you mean?" "I was on a conference call with Tokyo when he found it. He ran into my office, screaming with joy, begging me to come outside and watch him ride. I waved him away." Preston's voice cracked, breaking into a sob. "I closed the door on him. I watched him from the window, riding circles in the driveway alone, while I made another $1 million. I never went outside. I never fixed the seat for him. I just watched. Tell him that, Sam whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. Don't tell him about the assets. Tell him you watched from the window and wished you were out there. Tell him you were wrong. They worked on the letter for 4 more hours. By the time it was finished, the floor was littered with crumpled drafts. The final version wasn't typed on corporate letterhead. It was handwritten, in shaky, uneven script, on the last blank pages of the leather notebook. 2 weeks later, the rain in Seattle had turned into a relentless storm. Sam stood in the lobby of a rundown apartment complex in the University District. She had spent days tracking Arthur down. He wasn't living in luxury. He was working as a mechanic, living a life as far removed from the Sterling Empire as possible. When Arthur walked into the lobby, he looked exactly like the young man in the Polaroid, only hardened by years of resentment. He wore grease-stained coveralls and had the wary, defensive eyes of a stray dog. "You the one who keeps calling?" Arthur asked, his voice sharp. "I told you, I don't want his money. I don't care if he's dying. He's been dead to me since I was 19. "I'm not here to give you money," Sam said, holding her ground. "I'm the waitress he refused to tip 3 months ago." Arthur blinked, confused by the non sequitur. "What? He came into my restaurant, insulted me, and told me to get a real job, instead of spitting in his food. I gave him a lesson, and in return, he gave me a job helping him find the words to talk to you." She reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook. "He wanted you to have this." Arthur looked at the book with disdain. "Let me guess. His memoirs, How I Conquered the World and Lost My Soul." "Read the last entry," Sam said, thrusting it toward him. "Just read it. Then, if you still want to walk away, I'll never bother you again." Arthur hesitated, then snatched the book. He stood in the damp, cold lobby for a long time. Sam watched as he flipped past the business notes, past the blank years that represented his own absence, to the shaky handwriting on the final page. She saw his jaw tighten. She saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the leather. She saw him wipe his face with his sleeve, once, then twice, when Arthur finally looked up. The hardness was gone. He looked like a lost boy. "He's really dying?" Arthur asked, his voice thick with unshed tears. "He's waiting for you." The reunion at the hospital was quiet. There were no cameras, no lawyers, no fanfare, just a dying man in a bed and a son standing in the doorway, bridging a chasm of silence that had lasted a decade. Sam stood in the hallway, watching through the crack in the door. She saw Preston Sterling, the man who had terrified her only months ago, look up with naked fear in his eyes. She saw Arthur hesitate, his hand hovering over the doorframe, before taking a breath and walking to the bedside. Preston tried to sit up, but he was too weak. He just reached out a hand. "I like the bike, Dad," Arthur said, his voice cracking, the anger finally dissolving into grief. "It was a blue Schwinn. I rode it until the tires went bald." Preston let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He gripped his son's grease-stained hand with both of his. "I should have ridden it with you, Artie. I should have been there to pick you up when you fell. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know, Dad," Arthur whispered, sitting in the chair Sam had vacated. "I know." Sam gently closed the door, leaving them to the only wealth that truly mattered. Preston Sterling died 3 weeks later. He didn't die alone. He didn't die angry. He died on a quiet Sunday afternoon with the window cracked open to let in the smell of the rain, the clean, fresh scent of the city he had built. Arthur was sitting in the chair next to him, reading aloud from an old adventure novel they used to read when Arthur was a child. Sam was on the other side, holding his hand. His last words weren't about stocks, or buildings, or legacies. He looked at Sam, then at Arthur, his eyes clearing for one brief, lucid moment. "I'm finally rich," he whispered. And then the machine flatlined, a long, steady tone that signaled the end of an era. The funeral was a spectacle. Senators, business rivals, and celebrities filled the cathedral, their black umbrellas creating a sea of mourning. They spoke of his empire, his vision, his ruthlessness. They called him a titan. But in the front row, far away from the cameras, sat a young man in a simple suit and a woman holding the hand of a little girl who was finally, miraculously, growing her hair back. When the will was read the following week, the shockwaves went through the city. The board of directors expected business as usual. They expected Arthur to be bought out or sidelined. Instead, Arthur Sterling inherited the controlling interest in Sterling Horizons with a strict, irrevocable mandate written into the bylaws, a halt to all predatory eviction projects in the lower districts. And to the Sam Bennett Trust, Preston left $10 million, along with the deed to a commercial building on 4th Street, the same building Sam had once walked past on her way to scrub floors. The instructions attached to the trust were simple, for the ones who work real jobs. Don't let them fall like I almost did. 1 year later, the building on 4th Street was no longer a vacant office block. It was alive. The sign above the wide glass doors read, "The Sterling Bennett Foundation." Inside, the space was a sanctuary. To the left, a free legal aid clinic for tenants facing eviction. To the right, a medical advocacy centre for families navigating the nightmare of insurance claims. And in the back, the heart of the building, a massive, restaurant-style kitchen serving gourmet meals to anyone who was hungry, no questions asked, and no tips required. Sam walked through the main hall, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She wore a tailored suit, but her smile was the same warm, resilient smile that had once greeted rude customers at the diner. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. "Mom." Mia ran into the room, her cheeks flushed pink with health. She was wearing a bright yellow soccer uniform, mud on her knees, looking nothing like the fragile ghost she had been a year ago. "Slow down, bug," Sam laughed, catching her in a hug. "You're getting mud on the floor. Arthur is here. He brought the pizza for the staff meeting." Arthur walked in behind her, carrying a stack of boxes, laughing as he dodged a group of children running through the hall. He looked lighter, happier. The weight of his father's shadow was gone, replaced by the light of his father's redemption. He and Sam had become partners, him running the business with a conscience, her running the heart of the operation. "Hey, boss," Arthur grinned, setting the pizza down. "We got another donation today. Anonymous. Another check. Put it in the scholarship fund," Sam said without hesitation. She walked over to the large portrait hanging in the lobby. The first thing anyone saw when they entered. It wasn't a picture of Preston in his power suit, looking down on the world. It was the blown-up Polaroid of him, covered in mud, laughing, holding a 5-year-old Arthur on his shoulders. Underneath the photo, there was a brass plaque. It didn't list his net worth. It didn't list his buildings. It read, "Preston Sterling. He learned that the only thing you can take with you is the love you leave behind." Sam touched the frame gently, remembering the man who had once terrified her, and the man who had saved her daughter. "Thank you for the tip." "Preston," she whispered. She turned back to the room, full of noise, life, and second chances. Sam Bennett finally had a real job, and it was the best job in the world. Preston Sterling thought he was just refusing a tip. He thought he was teaching a struggling waitress a lesson about ambition. But in the end, Sam taught him that ambition without love is just a faster way to die alone. It's easy to look at someone in a service job, someone struggling, and judge them. It's easy to write, "Get a real job" on a receipt. But we never know the battles people are fighting behind closed doors. We never know if the person pouring our coffee is working their third shift to pay for a child's chemotherapy. Preston Sterling died a wealthy man, not because of the millions in his bank account, but because in his final moments, he finally understood the value of a human connection. He learned that you can't buy forgiveness, but you can earn it. I want to know what you think. If you were in Sam's shoes, and you found that diary containing the secrets of the man who humiliated you, would you have returned it, or would you have sold it to save your daughter? It's a hard choice. Let me know your answer in the comments below. I'll be reading them. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps us share these stories with more people. And if you believe in second chances, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. Remember, be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.